A black woman is walking home in a rich neighborhood when a white cop suddenly stops her. She tries to explain, but before she knows it, he grabs her, slams her on his car, and cuffs her like a criminal. What crime did she even commit? Stay tuned, because what happened next will leave you speechless. Tessa Langley strolled down Kensington Avenue, dressed in black jacket and a simple pant. She looked like any other young woman enjoying a quiet Saturday. But to Officer Hank Morrison, she looked like trouble. Hank sat in his cruiser, one hand draped lazily over the steering wheel, the other holding a styrofoam cup of black coffee. He'd been patrolling Windermere Heights for almost 15 years, and he knew who belonged and who didn't, at least in his mind. And this girl, black, dressed in athletic wear, walking alone in an area where the only black folks he ever saw were wearing aprons or cleaning uniforms. She didn't belong. His radio crackled with a report about a burglary 3 blocks away. The suspect, a black male, around 6 feet, wearing a dark hoodie. Morrison's eyes flickered back to Tessa. She wasn't a man, and she sure as hell wasn't wearing a hoodie. But that didn't matter. Suspicious was suspicious. Wait a second. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. He threw the car into gear and pulled up alongside her, rolling down the window. Hey you, hold up a second, he called out. Tessa didn't hear him. She was still lost in her music, swaying slightly as she walked. That irritated him. He slammed the car door shut and strode toward her. I said Hey. Startled, she yanked out her earbuds and turned to face him. Excuse me. Morrison's eyes scanned her up and down, his mouth set in a hard line. What are you doing around here? Tessa blinked. Walking. He stepped closer. You live around here? Tessa felt the first pang of unease settle in her stomach. Why? Just answer the question, Morrison snapped. Tessa sighed, her patience thinning. Yes, I live in this city. That's not what I asked, he shot back. Something about the way he looked at her, like she was already guilty of something, made her chest tighten. She had heard stories like this before. Seen the videos. Read the headlines. But surely, this wasn't happening to her. Not here. I'm just trying to get home, she said carefully. I haven't done anything wrong. Morrison let out a low chuckle. People who haven't done anything wrong don't get so defensive. Tessa clenched her fists. I know my rights. Oh, you do, he smirked. Good for you. The radio crackled again. Suspect last seen heading toward Kensington Avenue. Morrison's hand went to his belt. Put your hands where I can see them. Tessa's heart nearly stopped. What? Hands. Now. Wait, hold on. Are you? Before she could finish her sentence, Morrison grabbed her wrist and yanked her forward. Hey, stop, she screamed, twisting against his grip. But he was stronger. With a force that knocked the wind out of her, he slammed her face first against the hood of his cruiser. A bystander gasped. A woman across the street fumbled for her phone. Tessa struggled, her cheek burning against the hot metal. You're making a mistake. I didn't do anything. Morrison yanked her arms behind her back and snapped on the cuffs. You can explain that down at the station. Tears blurred Tessa's vision. Please. I didn't do anything. But Morrison wasn't listening. To him, she was just another suspect. Another criminal. Another black person who didn't belong. The air in the Windermere Heights police station was thick with the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant. Tessa Langley sat on the cold metal bench in the holding area, her wrists sore from the too tight cuffs, her mind racing. Her heart pounded as she replayed the last hour over and over again. Officer Hank Morrison's sneer, the way he had slammed her onto the hood of his car, the humiliating stares from bystanders who had done nothing to help. She had heard stories of things like this happening. She just never thought she'd be living one. Across the room, Morrison leaned against the desk, chatting with another officer like he hadn't just violated someone's rights. So what do we got? The other cop asked. Morrison shrugged. Caught her snooping around Kensington Avenue. Matched the description. Description said male. She was acting suspicious, Morrison said dismissively. She gave me attitude. The other officer frowned but said nothing. Tessa lifted her head. I want my phone call. Morrison turned, amused. That's cute. Who you gonna call? Your lawyer. He smirked. Or maybe your boyfriend. Let me guess. He's one of those rich types who's gonna come in here throwing a fit. Tessa's jaw tightened. You don't know who I am, do you? Morrison chuckled. Yeah. And who exactly are you? Tessa stared at him for a long moment. Then calmly she said 2 words. Tobias Langley. The room went silent. Morrison frowned. What? My father, Tessa said, her voice steady. Tobias Langley. Morrison scoffed. And I'm supposed to know who that is? The older officer standing nearby let out a slow breath and rubbed a hand over his face. Oh hell. Morrison glanced at him, confused. The officer shook his head. Judge Tobias Langley. Supreme Court of this state. Morrison's smirk vanished. No, he said, shaking his head. No way. Tessa lifted her chin. Call him. Tell him where I am. Morrison hesitated, but the other officer had already grabbed the phone. Within 20 minutes, the station doors burst open. Judge Tobias Langley was not a man who needed an introduction. He was tall, with a presence that commanded attention, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that made him look like he belonged on the cover of a legal magazine. His usually calm face was tight with fury. And he was not alone. Behind him marched 2 lawyers, a district attorney, and a police commissioner. The entire room fell silent. Morrison felt his throat go dry. Tessa had never been happier to see her father in her life. The judge's eyes locked on Morrison. Where is my daughter? Morrison pointed toward the holding area, now suddenly looking smaller than he ever had before. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more, hit that subscribe button now. Don't miss out. The judge turned to the officer at the front desk. Release her. Now. The officer scrambled to obey. Tessa's cuffs were off in seconds. She stood, rubbing her wrists, resisting the urge to cry. She wouldn't give Morrison the satisfaction. Her father turned back to Morrison. You. Office. Now. Morrison swallowed hard. Sir, I. Now. The office door slammed shut. Judge Langley didn't sit. Morrison did. He had no choice. The judge's voice was eerily calm. Do you have any idea what you've done? Morrison licked his lips. Sir, she was in a high-crime area. High crime? The judge's tone was ice. Windmere Heights? You mean the neighborhood where I've lived for 20 years? Where my daughter grew up? Morrison had no answer. The judge stepped closer. You saw a black woman walking and assumed she was a criminal. Morrison's face burned. That's not true. Then explain why you assaulted my daughter in broad daylight. I thought she was suspicious. The judge let out a cold laugh. Suspicious of what? Breathing. Silence. The judge leaned forward. Your career is over. Morrison's stomach dropped. Wait. The door swung open again. The police commissioner stepped in. You're suspended, he said simply. Effective immediately. Morrison shot to his feet. Sir, this is insane. The commissioner shook his head. Get out. Morrison's hands clenched. He turned to the judge, his face red with anger. This is bull. Out. Morrison had no choice but to leave. Back in the main lobby, Tessa stood with her father, watching as Morrison stormed out. She turned to her dad. He'll get another job, won't he? The judge exhaled slowly. Maybe. But not here. Tessa crossed her arms. That's not enough. Her father gave her a long look. Then do something about it. Tessa met his gaze. I will. As they walked out of the station, past the murmuring officers who suddenly saw her in a new light, Tessa knew this wasn't over. For Morrison, it was a suspension. For her, it was a beginning. She had a voice, and she was going to use it. If you think justice was served, hit that like button. If you think more needs to be done, drop a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking real-life stories like this.